Hey YouTube, Todd here again, some guitar guy. First off, and as always, thanks for watching. So, a bit more of a somber mood making this video. Covering this is actually not a recent crash, happened back in May of 23. But it caught my eye. It popped up on a social media group I follow. And it caught my eye for a couple of different reasons. First of all, this is what's left of a Cessna 172 variant. So I do have some time in my logbook in a 172 back in the day, but it has been quite a while. Secondly, there were 4 deaths in this. So that was my initial question. Why were 4 people in a 172 to begin with? Now, it turns out this is a variant, and arguably, at least under some conditions, arguably capable of 4 adults, at least under some conditions, and very tempting, and we'll kind of get to that as we explore the details about the plane. But this was the military variant of the 172, and this is probably 12-13 miles south of Pikes Peak out in Colorado. So mountainous flying, and I actually do have a little bit of experience locally during my flight training. We not with this elevation now, that we flew into Asheville with my CFI on one of the dual cross country requirements. So not the elevation, but very similar weather. Moderate to severe turbulence was forecast. That was backed up by any number of PIREPs at the time. Switching on frequency, there were several aircraft, 20 and 30 and even further out, inbound for Asheville that just said no, not today, vector me back. And the one I remember the most was a Gulfstream jet. So they didn't anticipate weather that rough, and requested vectors back to their departure airport. And to give you an idea before I go any further with this, what it's like to fly in, and I'll jump ahead a little bit in this. Okay, so this is, I don't think I knew that term until now, the mountain wave phenomenon. So the wind hits the ridge perpendicularly and causes all these waves and updrafts and downdrafts, and they go on in the final report and estimate downdrafts as strong as 500 feet per minute and updrafts as strong as 1,000 feet per minute. So the scariest roller coaster you've ever been on does not compare to flying in this. And I flew in that with wind shear, moderate to severe turbulence, and in a 150, not in the 172. I mean, yeah, it's to keep your track. You would go. I had to go from flying from looking out the passenger, the right side window, to the left side window, back to the right side window in just a couple of seconds, and catching these updrafts and downdrafts at the same time. But the big difference I had, the big advantage I had, and the only reason I'm here making this video is I think I probably had the world's best CFI right seat, who would go on just a couple of years later to be awarded the Wright Brothers Lifetime Achievement Award for 50 years of safe flight. 50 years. So he's right seat, and of course he's having a ball as we're getting knocked around. All that. Now he ultimately took the controls to land the plane, which I was more than maybe I ought to do a video on that, but I was, he couldn't have said that too quick, because there's no way. And that's the reason he took me in those conditions, is to show me what it's like. And I don't know, so that I don't do that. But anyway, so that's one huge advantage. And then the other huge advantage I had is that we got our altitude early. We weren't starting at the base of the mountains. We had, oh geez, how far would that be? Plenty of time for a cruise climb to get to altitude, and we did. So by the time we hit the weather, we were already at altitude, not trying to climb through it. But the final report's up. I'll leave this link in the description, as they do have several sources listed, and then on up to the very top. This is the variant, the T41-B, like I said, the military variant. So I had to learn about that. Learned actually a lot, like I said, making this video. The T41 was the military variant ordered back in the 60s, as they were looking at kind of transitioning from using their jet trainers for pilot training to going back to props. And they liked the 172, but they didn't like the power that the power plant. They wanted more power, so Cessna obliged, and I believe it was the Skymaster engine they fitted to the 172. So from the firewall back, it's an interior, it's a 172. But from the firewall forward, now you're talking 210 horsepower engine, increased tanks because it's a good bit thirstier, increased tank capacity, and a long-range version was also available. Now the civilian version of this, called the Hawk XP, had a derated power plant down to 195. The plane also came with a constant speed prop. So for the average private pilot with no additional endorsements like high performance and or complex, I mean, this is about as high as you can go as far as performance without having to upgrade your cert. Now, the max gross is a little bit, a couple of sources I see listed at 2550, which I think was the military rating. The NTSB and other sources use 2500 as the max gross. Does 50 pounds make a difference? Well, yeah, it can. So whatever it was, 2550, 2500, the NTSB kind of, just settles it and uses 2500 and figures max gross weight, because there were 4 adults. How do I know there were 4 adults? Well, the news media reports the names the following day, and they wouldn't do that if juveniles were involved. B, the 2 of the passengers had the same surname, so they were either husband and wife, brother and sister, father and daughter, something along those lines. But I'll link this because this is a pretty good write-up. I think an unbiased opinion of the plane. So I'll link that in the description. And then I also found this site, oddly enough, from the Cardinal Flyers page, but they do a pretty good write-up on speeds. And the big thing, and I think they listed it at 195. The NTSB report listed at 210. So I don't, whether it was the reduced, and the way they derated the horsepower is they limited the RPM on the civilian models. So 195 or 210, yeah, you get a little bit better performance. Again, they list the 2550 and a 17,000 foot service ceiling, which that, well, it didn't come into play in flight planning. I suppose it was. So here's the picture of the bird. A pretty cool little bird, and it's basically a hot rod 172 with that either 195 or 210 horse engine under the cowling, and does it does tint one, and under, wherever this is, with these kind of wide open spaces and the rising terrain, it probably would make, or at least tempt one to put 4 people in it. Maybe have fuel or reduce fuel payload, but definitely a solid 3-place, 3-place plane, because it's still a 172 frame. So a bit about the pilot. I think that's enough about the plane. These names are out there. I'm not going to cover them in this video, just to respect the families and the victims. But this pilot was 61 at the time of the crash. Looks like he started his training back in 2016, and then switched over with the 3rd class medical, switched over to basic med, I guess, either in 19 or 21, and maybe that's when he finished his certificate, or it was reissued. I don't know, but this is the last date of issue, not the original date of issue, was just before Christmas in 21. Private pilot. Interestingly, not only single engine land, but single engine sea, and we have this sport endorsement for gyroplane. Further, the NTSB report lists him, I believe, at 850 hours, all aircraft. It doesn't give how many hours in this plane. And he hails from the departure airport area, Florence, Colorado. So, yeah, I think it's pretty safe to say most of, if not all, of those 850 hours. So that makes him, the 850 hours in general, in my mind, makes him a solid mid-tom, maybe higher mid-tom pilot. And then living in this area, if most, if not all, of those hours are probably mountainous. I mean, they would almost have to be. So yeah, I mean, experience and ability is not really the issue here, sadly. And as so many crashes are, I think it comes down to aeronautical decision making. So this is what I've come up with in my flight planner for an approximate flight path for them. This is the crash location taken from GPS coordination, or coordinates coordination. Here's 1 Victor 6, Fremont County Airport, and I believe that's Florence, just to the south. Flying just east of north, coming by Colorado Springs, and then this is the Denver class Bravo, headed to Centennial Airport, which was class Delta under that big shelf. So when I first plot this and looking at the chart, I have to ask myself, well, why did he pick to go over the highest elevation in there? Why didn't he go west or east and just go around it and take that out of play? And just before I zoom in too much, if you don't know how to read these, the lighter the color, the lower the elevation. The darker the color, the higher the elevation. So I don't know, to me that's kind of the danger warnings. And this bright yellow here, that just signifies that's not elevation data, that just signifies the town. But as we zoom in here, and just some things to note, the destination airport, the elevation, field elevation is 5,400 feet. It's kind of situated in this nice little valley to the west of Pueblo, Colorado. And then, as it gets darker, the terrain, the elevation increases until we get to here. And that's almost the darkest of the dark. And we zoom on in and see the dark brown, which is the highest. That's as far as I can zoom. But that dot would be an observation tower, the highest point, 14,110 feet above sea level. Which to the left, we see this big blue number, 14 with a little 5. That is the FAA telling you if you're flying in this quadrant, which starts just north of the airport, okay, and then runs up this line for the TAC part of the sectional, and all the way up to here. If you're flying in this quadrant, that's your minimum safe altitude, and that is under, I wouldn't say ideal, but under kind of normal conditions. But at 14.5, that only puts you, 390 feet above peak. But once I saw this, and once I realized what this is Pikes Peak. So that was the why. They wanted to fly over Pikes Peak, probably take some photos, maybe circle it. I don't know, but that was the why, Pikes Peak. And then they left at 9:20. We see, and I do have this plane plugged in, about a 38-minute flight. I don't know if I had winds on or not. Yeah, no wind plan. So 38-minute flight, 70 nautical miles. And the reason for 16.5 I'm going to get to. And 130 knot cruise speed. So, yeah, probably fly up for lunch and then maybe return back. But trouble, they only made it about 13 nautical miles from the departure airport, and the plane just wouldn't make the climb, was the end result. So let's go to satellite view. There's Pikes Peak, and I'm sure it's stunning. No doubt it is. But, and some of you may say, why don't you just turn around, or, something along those lines, which is a reasonable question. Problem is, I think once you leave this little plateau and get over this gorge here, you are basically committed. Now, this isn't his exact flight path. We'll see that in just a minute. He flew a little bit more to the east, probably following this little saddle. But I mean, once you get up there, once you cross this gorge, you maybe can, and that looks, that's higher there. You're committed to this. There's kind of like a no-go around airstrip. Now, one of the pictures, and I noticed this prepping for the video, now I have to find it again. There is, oh, here it is. We see this, or I see this. That is it. That's all I see as an alternate. And that would have had, the pilot would have had to commit somewhere back here and said, okay, we're not making it. We're going to make a forced landing here. And that is certainly no cornfield in Nebraska. I mean, that is tight. And it dog legs, and yeah, that would take some flying to get in there. But that's where the crash site was. And to give you an idea, we can even see the roads. And that's really weird. Looks like a roundabout on this dirt road. But they were reported overdue later that day. Don't know what time. It's not in any of the documents. The search was not begun until the next morning, and I think another private pilot spotted it. I don't remember if it was a chopper or an airplane. Anyway, another private pilot spotted it, radioed it in. First responders, of course, had to gear up and get up there, and then hike. So whichever road they took to get up there, and that was, I think they got on scene about 11 or 11:30 the next day, the next morning. So it was probably a solid hour getting up there, a solid hour hike, if not, 2. But yeah, I mean, just kind of restate the obvious, the tragedy, and I'll come back and we'll talk about maybe how it could have been flown differently with hopefully better results. So let me go to the report. Next question I would have would be, well, what were the flight conditions? So not going to cover this whole 8-page report, kind of going on down to the 5th page where you get to the flight conditions. VMC day, okay, leaving out of 1 Victor 6, 10 miles of visibility, clear, no ceiling. Now we start getting into the meat of it. Gusty winds, 19, gusting to 24 from 270. Turbulence, terrain-induced, forecast and actual. Severity, moderate. Lots of PyReps to back this up. Pretty close to standard day conditions, 29.96 and 18 degrees Celsius. I can't do that in my head, but I believe it converted to about 64 degrees Fahrenheit, so pretty close to that. No obscuration, which at least from what I see around here is pretty common to see mountain obscuration air mets. But the big one was this, the wind and wind gust, and this is mentioned in the they mentioned, you can read this, the trough that was immediately west of the accident site. The mountain wave phenomenon generated by the winds. So they decided to take off, and let's go on down. This is another head scratcher I have on this. So the departure airport, 1 Victor 6, they list the runway surface as vegetation. So I'm kind of like, what? Let me find it. Let me pull this up and see. So here's the from the AFD out of my flight planner, and I'm like, well, that's a 5,400 foot grass runway. No, it's this one. He took off from the shortest of the two. Even though wind was 270, he would have had a little, a crosswind component. Sure, it's not straight down the runway, but he decided to take off with a almost a direct gusty crosswind component on the grass runway. And yeah, I would every day of the week and twice on Sunday we would have taken off 2.9. But that's not what happened. So let's see. No, that's not where we want to go. Oh, well, we'll go here. Because the NTSB report references this publication from way back in 1999, back when, that's actually the year, that's when, January, I think, of that year when I had my taste of mountain flying. But tips on mountain flying. Now, it's 18 pages, and I'm not going to read it to you, but we will let's go back to the flight plan and zoom out just a little bit, talking about these numbers in minimum altitudes. They recommend a minimum in good conditions of plus 1,000 over above the highest point. So we'll just use the 14.5. That puts us at 15.5. It gives us a little bit of cushion. So we're pattern altitude above all this. And that doesn't sound like a lot. And they stay with that recommendation until the wind speed picks up to around or to 20 knots, and they advise increasing your altitude another 1,000 feet. So now we're up to 16.5. Well, the airplane service ceiling is 17,000. So even just preliminarily flight planning this, I would be hesitant. And then knowing 4 souls on board, I'm at or maybe slightly above max gross. The NTSB does mention quite often the density altitude, which should be a consideration, and it did play a partial fact, but I think in my opinion, the biggest was the weather, the wind, the mountain wave effect, the gusty crosswind, and just that roller coaster you're going to experience in a light aircraft flying over that terrain. So that is an excellent document, and I will link it in the description too, I think for any pilot or enthusiast to read. They also reference this very heavily, the climb performance. So that's kind of the first question. What altitude do we need, and can this plane actually obtain that altitude? And the answer is yes. We're pushing it, but the answer is yes, it can get up there. So the next question is, well, can it get up there in time to clear whatever the terrain is? And they reference these two at gross weight, 10,000 feet pressure altitude and 12.5. And they note that the climb performance is cut drastically from sea level. I mean, that's less than half of what the sea level performance is, and then down to 330. And keep in mind, this is under these conditions. 2800, which this plane may have had the 210 horsepower engine, no flaps, standard day conditions, which we were close to, and no wind. So he's fighting that direct gusty crosswind with mountain waves and all these crazy updrafts and downdrafts. So in actuality, he's not experiencing whatever the book numbers are. And of course, this is with a hot company pilot that knows the plane inside and out, maybe better than the designers, and knows how to get the best performance. The other answer, I think, to this would have been somebody has to stay home. We have to either 2 or 3 people. Then you start getting some, a better margin of safety. But of course, who wants to stay home? Everybody wants to fly over Pikes Peak, right? Which brings up something, another, and it's not mentioned in the NTSB report, but the passenger safety briefing, which is required even by GA pilots. This would have been the perfect time, and maybe they did discuss it, but to really explain the risk that we're about to undertake and the plan and the risk that goes along with it. And basically that being, there's nowhere to put down if we have an emergency. We are going to crash. Whether that was done, I don't know. Maybe they were all happy with it, and it was that important to overfly Pikes Peak that that everybody, everybody was on board. So, and another consideration too, we're talking about altitudes and recommendations and all this, is oxygen. And this wasn't mentioned in the NTSB report either. I guess it was a moot point because they never got up that high. But at 12.5 or below, there's no oxygen requirement for the pilot. Even up to 14,000, you can fly up to 30 minutes without oxygen. But the minimum safe altitude for that quadrant was 14.5. Now that's without any other, mountain flying safety tips or other things. So yeah, at 14.5, he would have needed supplemental oxygen. Now for the passengers at or below 15,000, there's no requirement. But once you get to 15,001 feet, supplemental oxygen has to be available. And there's no, like I said, there's no mention, but and that may or may not, he may have had oxygen for everybody, or there may have been oxygen for nobody, including himself. Like to think he at least had, himself covered and could use that if needed. Let's see. So photographs, and I'm going to go ahead and jump ahead here to this slide, or this site. This is the docket items the NTSB kind of uses when they work in this case. A lot of great information, including the FAA safety advisory that you can download for free, reference, whatever, until your heart's content. But here are the position data. So you see he meanders a little bit, probably because of that wind, and there's only 2 track data points here at 1524 and 1534, so almost 10 minutes exactly apart. Pretty much holding his heading, so it definitely appears to be hand flying the plane, and goes from 6,000 to 9,400 feet, and I figured that just to see what climb rate he was getting, and let's see, and I've cleared it, so let me do that real quick. 9,400 minus 6,000. Some of y'all can probably do it in your head. That's 3,400. Oh, I know why I cleared it now. Because 3,400 divided by the 10, he was getting about 340 feet per minute. And apparently did take off from the grass strip I mentioned. And I don't know if this is an estimate or what, but not climbing real well with 4 people on board and battling that crosswind. But once this gorge is, once you cross it, you are committed. And you see, it does look like he kind of flew the little canyon of sorts as much as he could. But why didn't you just turn around? Yeah, and do what? There's no way really to turn around. So we'll go down. Here's some more track points, and that, I think this is maybe a bit of an optical illusion because it looks like he's going down. But we see his speed is pretty constant, right? And his heading pretty constant, battling that crosswind. And then it doesn't give the vertical speed, but you can you see he goes from, that was interesting, 0.4 here to 0.9. So from here to here, according to their data, at the exact same altitude. So he's not climbing at all. And then finally here, he and we see his airspeed has dropped to 56. Knowing that would be my take on this, knowing that the imminent is coming. He pulls back, slows down. That's the stall speed on this aircraft. Don't know if he maybe pulled a notch or any flaps, and then the wreck. So, and that's a good picture showing that maybe potential, but I mean, you would have had to have planned the bailout, and this is only 10 seconds apart, so a couple of minutes anyway, and decided to try to get into this little dogleg valley. Investigation photographs, another great addendum. We have seen that picture, and I think that's probably maybe the best to show just the steepness and how quickly the elevation rises. So that's pretty stunning. Seen that photograph already. Just tragically beautiful. It just unforgiving terrain. And a couple of pictures of the right wing in a tree, and then a different angle, and it's really hard to tell if the flaps were deployed, and then they did pull the engine and go through it extensively, and nothing was found. And I've already covered this, so I'll link this. Yeah, if you want to really look at what they used to make their decision. And I'll finish by going back to the flight plan and the flight path, and how maybe this could have turned out differently. Well, let me stay zoomed in around this, because it all kind of keys with the start. So this is what I like to think I leave this presentation with. First of all, the big takeaway from the mountain flying safety tips for this flight, for this airplane with this many people in these conditions, is don't go. Don't take it. Drive, take another plane, but don't go. It's just too risky. Secondly, let's say I decided to take this flight. What would I do? Well, like I said from the start, there's a safer, less risky route, both to the west, kind of through this pass or valley or whatever the correct geological phrase is for that, or to the east, closer to Colorado Springs. And flight following would have been a definite given. Now, I don't know that he actually necessarily had time. I think with that climb rate and knowing how much altitude you needed to gain in that short of amount of time, he probably knew really quick that this was not looking good. Now why? And like I said, once he got over that gorge, there was kind of no turning back. But that's my number one takeaway. First of all, that I wouldn't go. Secondly, if I was going to go, I would go east or west, and most importantly, use the circling climb in this valley. And I would, call it out on CTAF and keep calling it out in case, someone switched over and didn't hear me. But I would not leave the safety of this departure airport and valley until I got to whatever I had determined my altitude needed to be. Now, going over this point, if we follow the safety tips guidelines, that's 16,500 feet. At least 15.5, and then at the very least, following the charge, 14.5. But I would have gotten to all that altitude before I turned north. And the same way for either of these east or west regions. Now, you could do these at less altitude. You wouldn't necessarily, by the book, I guess, in this quadrant, but we zoom in. I mean, this relief line is 8,000 feet. We've got these peaks in the darker brown over here at 10.7. And then eventually you're going to have to, well, I guess you actually could follow that, but let's just say 10,000 and another 1,000 on top of that, so 11,000 feet or so. You would have gotten that sooner. Yes, it's going to take longer going west or east, but you would have gotten there. And you probably would have still had a pretty good view of Pikes Peak. And if you really wanted to get above it, then you get up to the 15.5 or the 16.5 or even all the way up to the service ceiling, if you can do that with 4 people and get some good views. But you are a few miles away from it on either side, but you have options if things go wrong. I like having options, so that's my big takeaway. Get the altitude first, and then head off to the rising terrain, or just avoid it altogether would be the safest, I think, safest option. But again, sorry to be so long, but I do like to give these their due diligence. I mean, this is for people who are no longer with us, and I do think there's a lot to be learned from these crashes. But please remember to do the YouTube thing, and until next time, safe flying.